Your struggles aren't a personal failing. When you are having a hard time navigating all of the expectations and all of the responsibilities and just the immense pressure that we're under, to me, that feels like a somewhat reasonable response to an unreasonable situation that we're in. Welcome to the Sparkle Project. I'm Emily, a divorced mom of two on my own journey to shine a little brighter. This podcast is here to help you protect your sparkle amidst the chaos and impossible expectations of modern motherhood. If you're a mom ready to choose yourself and shine, you are in the right place. Let's dive in. Hello, welcome to the Sparkle Project. If you do not know me, I am Emily, a 31-year-old mom of two boys who are currently almost 8, which is crazy to say, and 5. I am also a somewhat newly single mom, although we're coming up on 2 years since my kid's dad and I separated. But, still figuring that out every day, it feels like. But such is the way with most things in motherhood, right? Like, we're constantly figuring things out. We're constantly entering new phases, new seasons of this journey and having to work on our feet because it's not the same as it was last week most of the time. This episode is coming to you in May, and May is Maternal Mental Health Awareness Month. This podcast is all about exploring identity and self-discovery in motherhood, and mental health is a big component of that because the tie between identity and mental health goes both ways. When we are struggling with mental health in motherhood and in life in general, it can really impact our sense of self and identity. And then when we're struggling with our sense of self and identity, that disconnect can also contribute to mental health issues. And so we're given this really awesome opportunity in May to call specific attention to maternal mental health. And I want to capitalize on the moment, take this moment to really acknowledge that, bring awareness to mental health struggles we may face, bring awareness to just how to maintain a healthy mental health as we progress through motherhood and life. I am not a mental health professional. I'm not a therapist or psychologist. And so this month I have some guest episodes with therapists, with people who are trained in mental health, specifically maternal mental health, and they are helping moms in their daily work. And I'm really excited to share those episodes with you. But for this episode, I want to focus on my own story and the takeaways that I've had dealing with my own mental health through my motherhood journey. Because even though we have made strides in normalizing conversations about mental health and destigmatizing mental health issues, especially in motherhood, we have a long way to go. And I think sharing our stories, being really intentional about being honest with the experiences we have and normalizing things that sometimes feel very taboo or almost scary to talk about, it can have a huge impact on how mothers are able to then show up for themselves when they are struggling as well. And so showing up, sharing my story, doing this episode is me really trying to do my part to bring awareness to maternal mental health and the struggles that are so often ignored for moms. Really with the goal of helping us all know that if we need help, if we need support, we can take action to get that help and get that support. We deserve to do that. So in preparation for this episode, I really was thinking about and reflecting on what my mental health journey has looked like through motherhood. And 3 major takeaways came to me that I feel like are important to share with you in your own journeys. Because wherever you're at right now, whether you are fine and you don't really need extensive mental health support because things are going well in your life, or maybe you are struggling, maybe there are things that are happening that have impacted your mental health, or you don't even know what it is, but you're not doing so great right now and you need support. Maybe you're getting that support. Wherever you're at, these takeaways may be something that help you in your journey. Maybe not, but if it can help one person listening, I think it's worth it. So the first takeaway I want to share with you is this. Just because it doesn't look the way you thought it would look doesn't mean it isn't real. When I think back to the experience I had being diagnosed with anxiety after my second son was born, I really have to acknowledge how proud I am of myself for taking the initiative to seek out the support I needed, even though I wasn't really sure that what I was struggling with could be classified as postpartum mood disorder, postpartum depression, or postpartum anxiety. Because in a lot of ways, I had struggled with mental health my entire life. I was always an anxious kid. I was somebody who dealt with a lot of anxiety in college. Honestly, probably should have addressed some things earlier on. But becoming a mom really shone a light on things. And when I had my first son in 2018, I definitely did struggle with a lot of anxiety. He was born at a healthy weight and pretty immediately started losing weight. He was just content and didn't feel like he needed to eat enough, I guess is really what it came down to. And we had to get a lot of support from a lactation consultant. I was able to breastfeed, but the journey to get to that point was really a struggle. We did a lot of like pumping and making sure like the breastfeeding was supplemented with the pumped milk. And I started tracking things really closely because I needed to. I needed to make sure he was eating enough. At one point, he got down into the first percentile with his weight, which is not where he was born. So it was stressful. And I was tracking very, very closely, making sure that he was eating enough, that he was pooping and peeing enough, all these things. And when I think back on that experience, first of all, was probably somewhat necessary to be tracking like that because we really needed the data. But it also contributed to me feeling anxious when like things weren't being tracked. And like I kind of had this like obsession with tracking everything that even once things kind of normaled out and he was doing well, breastfeeding was going well, he was getting what he needed, it was really hard for me to kind of break away from those patterns. Like the anxiety that came with that stress stuck with me through a lot of that first part of motherhood. And of course, we went into the pandemic, and I mean, the mental health implications of the pandemic alone just were crazy. And then if you're a new mom dealing with a baby, having like all these extra decisions to make because my son was 18 months old when the pandemic started and we needed help, but we also needed to be separated from people and all these things. Like it was a lot. It was a lot to manage and deal with. I had gone back to work, navigating all of that together. You know, I was struggling in a very real way with my mental health. And then fast forward to 2021, my second son was born. And even though we were in the middle of COVID protocols, nobody except my partner could be in the hospital with me. It was a fairly easy birth. And, you know, I was able to go home shortly after my son was born. And we started off on the right foot. I went to my follow-up appointments. I did the screening for postpartum mood disorder, passed with flying colors because I wasn't having feelings of hurting myself. I wasn't having feelings that life wasn't worth living, right? Like the things that they were screening me for, I wasn't experiencing those things. But a couple weeks after my son was born, I remember sitting on the couch and feeling this sense of impending doom. And it would like happen every single day. I remember dreading it getting dark because I would just like have this sense of anxiety that was depressing and it was debilitating. Like I felt like a shell of a person. And none of what I was experiencing, however, would have been caught on the screening. It wasn't. The screening that I was given in my appointment just didn't ask the right questions to get at the heart of what I was specifically experiencing. But what I was specifically experiencing was rough. It was really, really hard. I was having a hard time with my older son. I was having a hard time dealing with the nighttime feedings. I was having a hard time dealing with anyone who would come into my home trying to help. And it wasn't just the, you know, quote, normal baby blues kinds of things or, you know, the surge of hormones we get when we're crying, like things like that. I was really, really struggling. And I knew it, even though I also didn't know if I could get help for this, right? Because it wasn't the things that I was being screened for. Like I was fine in that way, but I wasn't fine. So during this time, I was on Instagram and I was watching some Instagram stories and came across a creator who had had her child just a couple months before me. And she started talking about her experience with postpartum anxiety. And I had a light bulb moment, a moment of recognizing that even though I was fine, right, according to the measurements that were taken in the doctor's office, I was okay. I wasn't struggling. I actually was experiencing postpartum anxiety. It just didn't look the way that maybe I thought it would. Having that validation from somebody sharing their experience gave me the courage and really like the language to legitimize my own experience and call my doctor and get in and get the help that I needed. I ended up going on to an anxiety medication that really did help me. It took a little bit to figure that out, but it really did help me. I went to therapy for the first time and really started addressing what was going on. And thank goodness I did. But the takeaway here is that my experience with postpartum mood disorder, with postpartum anxiety, did not look the way that I was told it would. The things that I was kind of keeping an eye out on for myself, those weren't the things I was struggling with. I wasn't having a hard time sleeping, honestly. Like, I actually was able to go back to sleep after waking up to feed my baby pretty easily. I wasn't frantically checking my baby at night. Like, in those ways, things were actually easier with my second son. But I was still struggling and struggling really, really deeply. Like, I was not well. And so I just want to leave you with that takeaway, that your struggle may not look the way that you expect it to look or that you thought it would look. That doesn't mean it's not valid. That doesn't mean that you don't deserve support. And that actually leads me very nicely into the second takeaway I have from my mental health journey through motherhood. We don't have to and probably shouldn't white knuckle our way through it. There is a major difference between coping with mental health and actually healing. And when we're just coping and white knuckling through and getting by, things tend to build up. It doesn't tend to get better on its own. So this is where getting support comes in. For me, again, getting support looked like seeing my doctor, trying out medications that really did help my anxiety, going to therapy, and just making sure the people around me knew what I was struggling with, what I was dealing with, so they could choose to show up for me in the ways that helped me. And while those supports did help me, I also need to acknowledge here that I continued to struggle with some pretty major mental health challenges, especially once I went back to work after my second son was born and faced pretty intense burnout in my role as a teacher. I knew pretty early on in that year that I went back that I would not continue my teaching career because I was suffering under the weight of it all. It was not doing well for my mental health for a lot of reasons, both the time that I was spending in the work that I was doing, also just how I felt teachers were treated. There was so much contributing to that. And even though I was working with professionals on my mental health, there were also life factors that did have to change. I knew that I could not keep white knuckling my way through this career as a teacher while also trying to show up for my kids. And so I ended up leaving my teaching career at the end of the year. Obviously, that is very unique to my situation. The fact that my career was really negatively contributing to my mental health. And as I went along, like, it wasn't getting better. And I did not believe that it would get better in that role and knew that even with as many supports as I could get, it just wasn't going to work. And so for me, choosing not to white knuckle through my mental health struggles not only meant getting that support, but also making very concrete changes in my life to put myself in a better position to have the space and capacity to actually tend to my mental health. For you listening, if you have struggled with your mental health, if you are currently struggling with your mental health, my point is not that you have to blow up your life and make changes in every area to be able to have good mental health. But my point here is that it's not just about managing symptoms. We can't ignore the cause of why we're struggling. And when it comes to maternal mental health specifically, there are factors that can have to do with our biology, but there are also so many life factors through the matrescence experience and through navigating the systems that we're in. And we can't just manage the symptoms. We also have to look at what's behind the struggles we're having. So this is not me telling you what to do in any way, but I do encourage you to work with a professional, work with a therapist, work with somebody who can help you to really get to the bottom of what's going on with your mental health so that you can approach it from a holistic lens and not just manage symptoms. While that can be crucial, right? We have to get the symptoms under control. Also understanding the root cause and getting to the bottom of that. That's how we have sustained, healthy mental health. And so again, this leads very nicely into the final takeaway I have for you today, that I really, when I think about my own journey as a mother and the work that I do in this space of supporting moms and talking about our identities and talking about who we are in relation to our role as a mother and existing outside of that role as well, This takeaway is so hugely important and cannot be ignored. We exist in a world that was not built for us. Of course, we're going to struggle sometimes. The patriarchal, capitalistic society that we exist within, particularly in the United States, just does not support us as mothers, but really, like, I would say as people. This is actually a conversation I've had with a lot of people in my life, including people who do not have children. Even just looking at the standard work week, the 9 to 5, 5 days a week grind that we're all kind of expected to fit into, that absolutely was not designed for mothers to thrive. And again, really, I would say it was not designed for everyone to thrive in. Like, there are some people who, like, that is really an ideal work situation for them. But for a lot of people, like, it's not. It's going to contribute to mental health issues. I think about even like during time changes when somebody getting off work at 5 o'clock doesn't have any time outside in the sunlight. Like, how are we expected to not struggle when we are spending so much time in our work without the time to decompress, without the time to exist as our full individual selves outside of those roles? And when we add motherhood to the mix of that all, if you are a working mom, you are not only expected to continue working at the level you were before you became a mom, but now you're expected to be 100% fully committed, fully devoted mom all of the time. And it's not just balancing motherhood and your job. There's all these other things that you are supposed to be keeping up with and that you want to be keeping up with. You need to be keeping up with your other relationships. You need to be keeping up with your hobbies because those things all contribute to positive mental health, right? But there's no time. There's no capacity for any of that. And then if you are a mom who does not go back to work and you are home with your child, there are so many opportunities in that role to feel a lack of sense of self, right? Which can contribute to poor mental health, or a feeling of guilt or like you're not doing enough because you think that society says you should be going to work, you should be contributing in a different way to your household. Like, there's so many pressures and expectations on us that do influence how we feel about ourselves, how we show up to the world. And this gets individualized. Like, we are told to practice self-care. We are told to fix our mindset. We are told to just, I don't know, change something in your life and it will be better. But it's actually the structure that we're working within that is the problem. And there have been multiple times I've been talking to people in my life and they are expressing a struggle they're having with their mental health, maybe anxiety or just feeling generally depressed. And, they're working on it. But there's so many times where I'm having these conversations and my brain just goes to like, of course you're struggling within this. And that's not to say, of course, that we can't work towards better mental health within the systems. But my point here is to depersonalize it a little bit and understand that it's not all you. Your struggles aren't a personal failing. When you are having a hard time navigating all of the expectations and all of the responsibilities and just the immense pressure that we're under, to me, that feels like a somewhat reasonable response to an unreasonable situation that we're in. And again, I don't say that with a sense of hopelessness in any way. It's not to say that if you're struggling, just like let yourself struggle because there's no hope. But it's to say that when you are struggling and you feel badly because of your struggle, understanding that there's so much more to it than just you. The world that we exist within contributes so much to how we are doing as individuals. It can sometimes take a little bit of that pressure off and help you understand the bigger picture that you are living and mothering within. Okay, those are my 3 takeaways. I don't know where you are right now. Maybe you're fine. Maybe you're white knuckling it and telling yourself that everyone else feels this way or that no one else feels this way and you can't share that with anyone. Maybe you already know that something needs to change, but you're not ready yet. Or maybe things are good right now and your mental health is feeling supported. You're feeling like you've got this. Wherever you are, I just want you to know that whatever you're feeling makes sense. It is valid and that you deserve support. You do not have to earn support. You do not have to reach rock bottom before you seek that support. It is always a good time to focus on our mental health, whether we are doing well or whether we are struggling. to prioritize our own emotional and mental well-being always is a good idea, because we have to keep showing up. We have to keep mothering. And we're doing that all in a context that is not going to make it easy for us. And the more supported we can be in our mental health, the better. So with that, we will be back next week with another episode, really acknowledging May as Maternal Mental Health Awareness Month. I hope you will tune into that. Until then, keep on shining. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Sparkle Project. Loved what you heard? Share this episode with a friend, and don't forget to leave a rating and review to show your support for the show. We'll be back next week with another episode. See you then.